In that great classic movie, A Man for All Seasons, there's a scene about Richard Rich, a young Cambridge graduate. He's a young guy of 22 or 23, and he's looking for a big job in the court of King Henry VIII. Now, Thomas More, who is the Lord Chancellor of England, that's like the Prime Minister, an influential man, says to him, "Well, I have got a job for you."
Yes, I'll offer you a post with a house and £50 a year.
What post?
At the new school.
Teacher.
Richard Rich is so disappointed. A teacher, he says.
A man should go where he won't be tempted. Why not be a teacher? You'd be a fine teacher, perhaps a great one.
Richard fires back.
If I was, who would know it?
You.
Well, that's the giveaway. That's the sign of ambition, in the negative sense. If I were, who would know it? He doesn't want to accomplish great things. He wants to be noticed for it. Now, similarly, in the Gospel of Mark, Mark beautifully portrays two people in the grip of ambition, namely the disciples, James and John. From a spiritual standpoint, their opening line to Jesus gives away the game. Listen, they say, "Master, we want you to do us a favor." Now, my friends, could I give you some very good spiritual advice? When you find yourself saying, like James and John, "Lord, do whatever I want," then you are in a bad spiritual space. No, the right attitude is precisely the opposite. The Lord asking us to do whatever He wants. But things get worse in this gospel. When they specify what they want, they say, "Allow us to sit one at your right hand and the other at your left in your glory." Notice, please, especially you politicians, there is no interest whatsoever in the good they might accomplish from those places of honor, the policies they might enact for the common welfare once they come into power. No. What they want here is glory. Allow us to sit one at your right and one at your left in your glory, so that we might bask in some of it. You know, they're thinking of thrones here, aren't they? They're thinking about places of prominence in the public arena. Well, there were two people at the right and the left of Jesus when He indeed came into His glory. This happened, of course, on the cross. And the two crucified thieves were there, one on His left, one on His right. Notice how in Mark's Gospel, Jesus always refuses when people call out to Him as the Messiah. He doesn't allow it. But only when He is silent in death, hanging on that cross, does He allow the centurion to say, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Because His glory is identical to His passion. And why is that? Because divine glory is not the same as human glory, especially under the conditions of sin. Divine glory always has to do with love, with the splendor of self-sacrifice. The splendor, the beauty, the glory of God is one of self-sacrificing love. I've mentioned before, of course, that unforgettable story of my personal patron saint and hero, Saint Maximilian Kolbe, a Franciscan friar in the Second World War. Right from the time when he was a very young man, he had a high ambition to serve God heroically. And his life did indeed take on that heroic splendor at the end. He was an inmate at Auschwitz, the German concentration camp. And while he was there, a fellow prisoner escaped. And in retaliation, the Nazis identified 10 men who would then be killed. When one of those men, who was married and had 2 little children, broke down in tears because of his family, Kolb stepped forward and said very simply and quietly, "I am a Catholic priest. I want to take this man's place." The Nazi gods were only too happy to see this priest put to death. So they put him into a starvation chamber where he died a few days later. Now that simple act would only have been noticed by a handful of his pathetic fellow prisoners. But it was the fulfillment of his ambition to be with Christ in his glory. You see, my friends, the difference between Maximilian Kolbe and James and John in the story that we read in the Gospel is that Kolbe knew what he was asking for. When he said, "Lord, let me be with you in your glory," he knew what that meant. James and John didn't know at the time. And you know, there's something very similar in the writings of one of my other great heroes, Thérèse of Lisieux, known as the Little Flower. From the time that she was very young, she too, like Kolbe, wanted to do something heroic for Christ. It led her to enter Carmel, the monastery, when she was only 15 years old. And it led her to, just before her death, to a life-transforming realization. She had wanted to do all the heroic things that the martyrs and the doctors and the missionaries had done. But she realized that in the confines of her little cloistered monastery, she could never accomplish any of that. But then it dawned on her, in this great moment of illumination, that the soul of all of those great accomplishments was the same, namely love. Love, as Paul taught, is the greatest of all the spiritual gifts. Love was what animated the missionary and the martyr and the doctor and the theologian. And therefore, Thérèse discovered that her ambition would be fully realized if she could become love in the heart of the church. That was the heart of her little way. Listen now, not doing great things, but doing little things with great love. Ha! Now that is something that we can all be ambitious for. Whether you make the beds in a hotel or clean the toilets, maybe you flip eggs in the Wimpy, maybe you teach little kids or balance the books or live in retirement with a grumpy old man, whatever it is, however small and boring and insignificant, do it with great love. Purge it of all the negativity, of all the egotism, all the self-involvement. My friends, don't worry about doing great things. Do little things with great love. And God bless you.